While you're going through this lecture, keep in mind this question and see if you can figure out the answer to this one. What are the two files that are required by Heroku when you try to deploy your application using GitHub? What the files are and why they are needed. We already have the webhook code on our local machine, which we wrote in the webhook.py file. We now need to commit this code to GitHub. Now, in order to do this, if you're familiar with GitHub and you already have an account, you can go ahead and just create a repository and commit the file and then move on a little further ahead in this lecture. If you're completely new to GitHub, I suggest that you sign up for a Git account. The sign up URL is at github.com/join. Once you've created a new account, it might be better for you to use the GitHub user interface in order to make your first commit to your first repository. The UI interface is far easier to use, and you can download GitHub Desktop here at this URL, desktop.github.com. With your GitHub account set up and your desktop user interface also installed on your machine, you're ready to get going. Click on Create a New Repository. We are going to create and commit our code here. We'll then make a few additional changes to this repository so that it's set up the way Heroku expects it. Now, creating a new repository is very simple. You give it a name. I'm going to call it a webhook for weatherbot. Now point this repository to a local directory on your machine. So code that you write within this path is what will be committed to GitHub when you're finally ready to commit it. This is where I want my webhook Python code to live. This is the directory that I have chosen. You can then initialize your GitHub repository with a README. I'm going to check this box because I do want a README. That's where I'll put in all the instructions. It's pretty standard practice. And then go ahead and click on Create Repository. The UI will connect to github.com and create a brand new repository for you. Now, I already have the Python code somewhere on my local machine. I'm going to switch over to my Xcode text editor and duplicate this file and make a copy which will live in the local path of my GitHub repository. This is the local directory on my machine where my GitHub repository points to. Now, if you switch over to the desktop user interface for GitHub, you'll find that webhook.py is available for you. We are now ready to commit this file to our master repository. Give the commit a description, webhook configured for the API.ai bot, and click on commit to master. We now publish this repository so that Heroku can pick up the code from here in order to actually deploy our application. So we give the repository a name, click on publish repository. Now let's switch over to github.com and see whether the code that we committed to our repository is now available. So go to github.com, sign in with the account that you created, and then check to see whether the repository is there. If you look at the activities on the right, you'll see that this repository is the latest one that we've edited. Click on the repository name and you'll find that we have a README because we said we wanted a README, and we have webhook.py on GitHub. We are not completely done with this GitHub repository yet. There are two additional files that we need to create and add to this repo before this repository is completely set up for our application to be deployed to Heroku. There are two files that we need to set up, a requirements.txt and a proc file. These files are mandatory for Heroku deployment. Heroku will not accept deployment via GitHub if these files are not present. The requirements.txt file will contain all the external dependencies that our Python code depends on, with appropriate version numbers for every package. Now, it's not really necessary to specify version numbers for your packages, but if you want your deployment to be consistent, you want to ensure that your code always works and it uses the right versions of the packages that it depends on, it's better to specify the version numbers as well. This you'll do in requirements.txt. For deterministic deployments, Heroku recommends that all package versions be explicitly specified and all secondary dependencies for your script also be explicitly specified. The second mandatory file that you need to specify in the root directory of your application is the proc file. The spelling of proc file should be exactly as you see on screen with a capital P. Make sure it's exactly the same. Don't add a .txt or some other extension. Procfile is a text file and it's simply called that, procfile. Now, procfile contains all the processes that we want executed on the Linux dynos when they're instantiated within the Heroku platform. Now, you specify a process per line within this procfile. There are different process types that exist. If you're running a web server, web is your process type. We can create these two new files right here within GitHub. Click on Create New File. This will open up a text editor window. We'll first set up our requirements.txt file. There are only two dependencies for our script. One is Flask and the corresponding version number from my local machine. And the second is the request dependency. Notice the structure of the requirements.txt. We have Flask equal to the version number and request equal to the version number. Now go ahead and give your file a name. It's called requirements.txt. Make sure you spell it correctly. It should be in all lowercase. Go ahead and say commit new file. So this requirements.txt will now be committed to our root directory, which is where Heroku expects it to be. Create a brand new file. This will be our proc file. Proc file should be spelled exactly as you see on screen with a capital P and no extension. We want to run a very simple web server on Heroku. So there is just one process that we want our Linux dyno to execute, which is a web process. And that web process we simply call Python on our webhook.py script. That's all we need for the proc file to have. Go ahead, click on commit a new file, and the proc file should also be created within your GitHub repository. We are now completely ready to deploy our application to Heroku. We'll simply connect Heroku to this particular GitHub repository and then deploy. So hop over to Heroku and then point Heroku to your GitHub repo. Within our GitHub account, search for the repository by name. We had named it starting with webhook, and there you can see it, webhook for weatherbot, and simply hit connect. One useful feature that Heroku offers when you connect to a GitHub repository is automatic deploys. This means that anytime there is a new commit to the master branch of your GitHub repository, a new web app will automatically be deployed. You don't have to explicitly manually go ahead and do it. This is a useful little feature. I'm going to enable automatic deploys. Within my repo, the branch that I want to deploy is the master branch. That's what I have selected here. I'm going to go ahead and hit deploy branch. And once you've done this, everything will be taken care of for you. So you can just sit back and watch the logs and see the deployment in progress. When we had created this application, we had specified the build pack to be Python. This is why Heroku has detected that we are installing a Python app. Now it's going to retrieve all the code from GitHub, look at requirements.txt for all the packages and dependencies that it needs to install them, it'll then build your application and then finally deploy it. This is the three-step process that Heroku follows. And because Heroku takes care of all the installation and all the packages that you need, this is why you did not need to have Python installed on your machine. Now, of course, in a real world scenario, you have to test your code locally before you deploy to Heroku. But this is a prototype and you're doing it in this class, so you can simply use the code that's available in this class directly and deploy it to Heroku. The three steps for application deployment are now complete, and you can now view this app on your browser. Click on View, and you'll see there's nothing there. You'll get a URL not found. Don't panic. This is not the URL for your app. The complete URL for your app has a /webhook at the very end. Now the message that you see has changed. It says the method is not allowed. This is because we've made a GET request to our server, and our server only accepts POST requests as it's sent by Dialogflow. Our webhook is now up and running. We just need to paste in this URL in our Dialogflow configuration, and we are ready to test our bot end to end. Coming back to the question we had asked at the beginning, what are the two files that are required by Heroku in order to deploy your application using GitHub? This is the requirements.txt and the proc file. Requirements.txt is where you specify all the extensions and the packages that your script depends on, along with version numbers And the proc file specifies the processes that you want to run on the Linux dynos when they're instantiated by Heroku. Both of these are mandatory and you can't deploy to Heroku without them.